Hey.
Please be seated. Okay. Good evening. I would like to welcome you all to this evening's council meeting and to those members of the public who are watching the live stream. I also just want to remind Okay. For those councillors who are accessing this meeting,
Just turn the volume up. We'll turn the volume up on our, rather than you having to shout.
yeah, thank you. For those councillors who are accessing this meeting remotely,
Next to that. No.
Is this
Yep.
working? Hello?
can you all hear me now?
Not really.
No? Okay. Okay.
Apologies, everyone. We did technical tests today and they all worked fine. So we'll just give it a minute just to make it work.
Can everyone hear me now? Brilliant. Apologies, everyone. Let me just start again. Good evening. I would like to welcome you all to this evening's council meeting and to those members of the public who are watching the live stream. I would like to extend a special welcome to Councillor Walker to his first council meeting following his recent election to the Borough Ward. For those councillors who are accessing this meeting remotely, a reminder that you are not counted as being present for the purposes of the Local Government Act 1972, and you may not vote on any item under consideration. Given the extreme weather conditions, members and officers are not required to be in formal dress and may remove their jackets and ties. Water has been provided outside of the chamber. There'll be a break in proceedings between 9:05 and 9:25, During this time, male and female prayer rooms will be available for use on the ground floor in rooms 58 and 63. Finally, can I please remind all councillors and officers who may be introducing reports, asking questions, responding to questions, or contributing to debate to ensure you switch on your microphones to ensure you are heard on the live stream. Please also be succinct so that we can conclude the meeting by 10 p.m. Apologies for absence. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Chapman and Councillor Selman. I have apologies for lateness from Deputy Mayor Bramble and Councillor Joseph. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Etty.
Apologies for lateness from Councillor Adejare and Councillor Claire Potter.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Potter is here. Brilliant. Thank you. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Race. Councillor Race.
Apologies from Councillor Mwema.
Councillor Mwema. Thank you, Councillor William.
Apologies for Councillor Premru, who I think has COVID.
Councillor Premru.
And she's online, but not in the chamber. And then apologies for Councillor Hayhurst. It's not here.
Sorry, can you please, Councillor
Hayhurst.
Councillor Hayhurst. Thank you. Councillor Woodley.
Apologies for lateness from Councillor Palace and for absence from Councillor Maxwell.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other councillors joining? Oh, sorry, Councillor Adams. Okay. Councillor Feast online. Okay. Okay, thank you. Are there any other councillors joining remotely?
Me.
Councillor Gordon.
I know some.
Councillor Olsen.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. For those councillors joining the meeting remotely, if you wish to speak or comment, please use the raise hand function and I'll invite you to speak if time permits. Please also refrain from using the chat function as this is not visible for councillors attending in person or those watching the live stream. Agenda item 2. Since being elected as Speaker, these are some of the events I've attended. The Platinum Jubilee Community Celebration at Springfield Park, which was followed by beacon lightning for the Platinum Jubilee on the top of Hackney Empire. Hackney Chinese Community Dragon Boat Festival, E5 Baby Bank 2nd anniversary, Planting a Tree to mark Refugee Week, National Windrush Day events, which included the unveiling of the fantastic Warm Shore sculptures by Thomas J. Price outside the Town Hall, Hackney's Armed Force Day Parade. An upcoming event is I'm hosting my first charity dinner to fundraise for St. Mary's Secret Garden on the 28th of July. It is an Eid dinner at a local Turkish restaurant in Stoke Newington. Please contact the Speaker's office if you would like to attend. Tickets are £30 per person and there are only a few remaining. We'll also be joined by mayors across London. On the 11th of July, a Memorial Day was observed for Srebrenica to commemorate the over 8,000 Bosnian Muslims massacred in 1995. I would like to invite the Council to observe a 1-minute silence to remember both the victim and survivors. Thank you. Please be seated. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Members are to note the guidance in declaring interest as set out in the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest relating to any item on the agenda? If so, could members please declare it now, indicating which item it relates to and the nature of the interest? No declarations. Agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree the minutes of the meeting of the annual meeting of council held on 25th May 2022 as a true and accurate record of proceedings? Yep, brilliant. Thank you. Agenda item 5, questions from the members of the public. I would like to welcome members of the public who are here to ask questions. The time allocated to this part of the agenda is 30 minutes, and I'll be strictly adhering to this. So I'll be grateful if everyone can be mindful of this. First question, Tyrone is unable to be here today and has requested that his question be asked to set out agenda item 4.5.1 in his absence. That is towards Councillor Coburn, the Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport. Please would you respond? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to Tyrone for bringing this important question. The appointment of a biodiversity officer forms part of an initiative to integrate the housing ground maintenance and the parks and green space services. This integration was put on hold during the pandemic, but will progress in 2022-2023, including the appointment of a biodiversity officer to deliver the work across the integrated services. The organisation, as in the council, needs to be adequately resourced to deliver our climate action plan, which will place additional demands on the authority. Today, you will see a report that will be tabled, which will go into great detail about climate change and the ecological crisis that we face, and talk about how the council is preparing itself to be ready. In January 22, the Chief Executive announced changes to the Neighbourhoods and Housing Directorate in order to maximise the synergies of inclusive economic growth, skills, regeneration, housing, climate change, public realm, and environmental services. These services have now been brought together under a new group director responsible for this area and entitled Climate, Homes and Economy.
Councillor Coburn, could you please stand up and
Oh, you would
say
like to stand
answer,
up?
please? Yes, please.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
I didn't know we changed. So, yep. Okay. So I'm delighted to welcome the new group director, Ricardo Hyatt, who joined the council last week. The co-location of these services provided increased opportunities to optimize joint working within the new directorate, supported by new executive leadership with an explicit climate focus, thereby further consolidating further structural service changes last year in respect of sustainability and the environment. A number of existing council teams within this directorate are at the very front of national leadership, such as those in transport and waste, and hence in some disciplines which will be coming already from well-owned skills base and understanding. As part of the development of each of the thematic action plans that sit within our climate action plan, there is an assessment of the staff resources that are needed to deliver its objectives. This is underway and will be completed prior to the climate action plan go to public consultation in the autumn. The exercise is considering both the technical skills required, more general internal resourcing of the climate agenda, and the softer skills that complement this. We are already looking at taking opportunities to make better use of existing staff resource that is required to meet the challenge we face. The training of 5 staff to become retrofit coordinators in housing services this year, building on new staff who joined those teams during the pandemic to strengthen our technical capacity for retrofit, and putting in place future plans to enhance our engagement skills and capacity to meet the need for more varied consultation approaches. There are many residents and groups with interests and skills as well. Delivering the CAP needs to find the optimal ways of harnessing them, building on the existing supportive relationships with our waste, street scene, and park teams, undertaking specific engagement with the environmental community of interest on the draft of the climate action plan, and seeking commitments from key partners in the borough to the net zero journey to increase impact is a key part of that. We're also heavily involved, both politically and at officer level, working with London councils where we are leading London-wide on the low carbon development and food consumption themes. Our mayor is chair of Transport and Environmental Committee, providing regional leadership on specific aspects. Together, they provide another mechanism whereby working with others can help meet some of the resource and skills constraints. So just to assure Tyrone, in short, and Mr. Scott, in short, as the climate action plan is developed, we'll be looking at much more additional staff capability and the required capacity to be able to meet the needs that we face.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Next question is for Matt Davies, to the Cabinet Member for Families, Parks and Leisure. Brilliant. Good evening, Matt Davies. Please ask your question.
I welcome the Council's ambitious proposals for nature recovery set out in last year's Green Infrastructure Strategy, and particularly proposed improvements in the north of the borough, including the long-awaited replacement of the appalling Stoke Newington gyratory system and new green links along Northwold and Dunsmuir roads. When are we going to begin to see this put into action?
Thank you. Councillor Woodley, will you please respond? You have up to and not exceed 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Matt, for your question and for your support for local nature recovery plan and for the improvements that we are planning on making across the entire borough, not just North Hackney, but as set out in the Green Infrastructure Strategy that we put out for consultation in spring of this year. We're indebted to officers for the research and partnership approach taken in developing the strategy. We work with the consultant ACOM, with the London Wildlife Trust and with local experts. And this approach means that we are building on the dedicated support we receive in our parks and green spaces. And when I refer to green spaces, I should stress that I include our blue spaces too, and take the opportunity to thank all the amazing Hackney volunteers who work with us to plant trees, build habitats, litter pick, river pick, build floating gardens, and restore areas damaged by footfall, invasive species, and actually even a grass fire in recent days. And while I'm horrified that we're at the point of having to find ways to mitigate flash floods and 40-degree heat waves, I know we are also really lucky to enjoy the support of so many Hackney residents in all that we do, and particularly in tackling the climate emergency. Indeed, most of the complaints I've received recently have been from where we fail to keep up with community interaction in our work. And bottom line is that if you'd like to help us to make Hackney's infrastructure greener and more resilient to climate change, then please don't hesitate to reach out to me and to officers so that we can work in partnership. Sorry, I'm really not sure if the mic's playing up or not. Is it? Okay. So we are one of the greenest inner London boroughs, and our strategy outlines how the council, alongside others, intend to develop our networks of green infrastructure to deliver physical health, mental health and environmental benefits for residents, as well as ensuring we secure the maximum contributions from new building developments wherever these arise. And you'll know that connecting to nature was a core part of our child-friendly borough, our child-friendly places supplementary planning document. And that access to our parks and green spaces offered respite and new discoveries also to many families in Hackney across the sort of periods of lockdown through the pandemic as well. Green infrastructure like our open spaces, our wildflower meadows, our rewilded areas, our newly planted trees, our rain gardens, and green roofs and blue infrastructure like canals, rivers and wetlands help to build the borough's resilience to climate change by preventing flooding, increasing shade and reducing the impact on Hackney streets of high summer temperatures, a priority that has obviously been brought into sharp relief this week. Whilst this is a new strategy for the council, we continue to deliver projects that contribute to the outcomes, including completing our street tree programme that has seen our street tree canopy increase to 30%, installing rain gardens to mitigate areas of flood risk, and completing a wide number of improvements across all the open spaces we manage to make them better for both people and for nature. And the success of this work, which is both enjoyed on the ground and celebrated through increasing green flag status in all our parks and green spaces, is a real testament to a small workforce consistently doing more for less resources. Sorry, couldn't resist looking at our chief exec with that point. As you've seen through the recent consultation process, the draft strategy identified a number of spatial opportunities where we can better link open spaces. We're keen to get on with delivering this work once we've brought forward the strategy for adoption later this year. In respect to the potential green links identified in the strategy, the next steps will involve ground truthing. So what that basically means is recognising that they're still very outline, and that what we can really do is investigate them with local support. So I hope you'll get involved along with other local residents. However, there are some major projects, such as the Stoke Newington Gyratory, that have been significantly impacted by the current state of finances at Transport for London, who are the major funder. Their state of flux means it is difficult to predict when this scheme may be able to progress, but we continue to make the case with them for its ongoing priority within annual funding settlements. And the Mayor has raised this with TfL on a number of occasions, as I'm sure Councillor Cockburn has as well, and suggesting improvements that would have an immediate and significant effect. So we're also looking at implementing 20-mile-an-hour speed limits around the Gyratory in the autumn. We're asking TfL to implement additional road safety measures, and we know that residents in that area will really appreciate those moves, as they would in other areas across the borough. We are all, I'm sure, highly aware that we're likely to be entering a further period of financial austerity, no matter which way the leadership for the Conservative government kind of works out. And hence, we are using all our ingenuity to address those constraints. We've been successful in a number of external funding applications, and again, it's with the support of people on the ground that we're successful in those funding bids. So we'll be really focused on community partnership, community collaboration, chasing.
Thank you, Councillor Woodley.
And continuing to do as much work as we can in Hackney. And again, please do get involved, and thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Matt Davies, do you have a supplementary question? Your supplementary question must arise directly out of the original question or reply and must not be a speech or a statement. All right, thank you. So, given the background noise from the air conditioning unit, are members happy to suspend the standing rule under Council Procedure Rule 25.7? Sorry, given the background noise and how hot it is in here, are we all happy to suspend the standing rule under the Council Procedure Rule 25.7? Yes. Yeah, Councillor. Yeah.
Are you talking about standing and sitting? What we've been sitting now for the last 5 or 6 times. What's changed your mind today at all?
So thank you, Councillor Steinberger, but in order for that to happen, we have to formally suspend it for each meeting. So that's why the Speaker has asked us if we wouldn't mind it being suspended for today's meeting. But thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question is from Peter Snell to Mayoral Advisor for Housing Needs and Homelessness. Good evening, Peter Snell. Thank you for joining us remotely. Please ask your question.
I apologise, Speaker, that I can't attend in person, but I'm isolating with COVID, I'm afraid, a few more days. So, sorry about that. So, I have read that there is a refurbishment of Cape House in Dalston. What support is the council putting in place for residents needing to relocate during the refurbishment? And how long will it take for that those arrangements to be in place and the works to be completed?
Thank you. Councillor Etty will be responding to this question. You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Peter Snell. I hope you recover quickly because I know you wanted to join us in the chamber today, but unfortunately you are slightly unwell. Thank you for the question. Let me assure you, in line with our manifesto commitment, we said we will continue to refurbish temporary accommodation, hostels, so that our homeless residents can have a decent place to stay in order to meet the growing needs of single homeless people and families. Cape House is a privately owned hostel in Dalston. It's providing 117 units of single accommodation consisting of shared rooms, and it has been used for temporary accommodation approximately for about 20 years. Hence, there is need for refurbishment. On February 28, 2022, the Cabinet agreed to extend the hostel's lease. This will provide improved, urgently needed accommodation for our residents, and the improvement includes self-contained, reconfigured units for single people with their own ensuite and kitchenette. The renovation will improve the property's environmental performance to make it more sustainable, as well as adding 2 units designed for disabled residents. The refurbishment will take the accommodation to a much higher standard and support our ongoing commitment to ensure we will always provide a good standard of living for our residents in needs and provide safe accommodation for all our residents to maintain a healthy standard of living. There is no doubt this refurbishment will benefit both our local community and some of the vulnerable residents in our borough. Cape House, as you know, consists of 2 blocks. We have Block A and Block B. Block A consists of 57 rooms, and it has 25 of those residents are placed by London Borough of Hackney. Block B consists of 58 rooms and has 25 placements for London Borough of Hackney. Block B has already been fully decanted. All tenants received a letter advising on next steps, depending on what basis they occupy their room. It could be temporary accommodation tenants placed by London Borough of Hackney. They were moved to alternative placement. Others are placement from other councils, which were referred back to the placing borough. And the final section is the private tenants. And the private tenants were able to contact the Benefit and Housing Needs Service for tailored housing advice. Also, I can assure you that a temporary accommodation officer made a regular visit to Cape House in order to provide support and answer questions. We are currently in the process of assisting with the decant of Block A. The notices to quit are being served in a phased approach, which means, we are doing 11 at a time. That's what it means, a phased approach. So it's in batches of 11. And this is being done and started on the 28th of June, 2022. This will allow us, the phased approach will allow us to provide tailored housing advice to tenants that require our assistance. The work on Block A is anticipated to take 12 months to complete, and the total completion for the project is approximately 2 years. But what I can assure you is we continue to build new homes at dozens of sites across the borough, and we will continue to work to increase the supply of permanent, genuinely affordable homes in Hackney. Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you very much, Councillor Etty. Peter Snell, do you have a supplementary question? Your supplementary question must arise directly out of the original question or reply and must not be a speech or a statement.
Thank you for that very comprehensive reply. I have no supplementary.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us virtually, Peter Snell. We have now reached the end of the public questions. Okay. We have now reached the end of the public questions. I would like to thank the members of the public who have submitted questions. Moving on, agenda item 6, question from members of the council. The maximum time allocated for this item is 30 minutes, and I'll be strictly adhering to this. Can everyone please be mindful of the time frame? Cabinet members who will be responding, please note you have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes. Please can I ask that you be as focused and as succinct as possible so that we can get through as many questions as possible. After 30 minutes, any questions not answered will receive a written response. May I remind members that any supplementary questions must arise directly out of the original question or the reply and must not be a speech or statement. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 10.4, questions from members of the Council have been alternated between the majority and minority group. The first question is from Councillor Anya Sizer to Cabinet Member for Health, Adult, Social Care, Voluntary Sector and Culture. Councillor Sizer, please ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Hackney Council's Hoxton Street Market is a great place to buy food and a hub for the whole Hoxton community. But it has also helped tackle food poverty, accepting council food vouchers such as Alexandra Rose vouchers for some of our most vulnerable residents in Hackney. Can the Cabinet Member with responsibility for food justice outline the other measures the Council has taken to address food poverty in our borough? What is he going to do to fight for food justice for all? And the steps he is going to make Hackney a right to food borough?
Thank you, Councillor Sizer. Councillor Kennedy, would you please respond? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thanks, Councillor Sizer, for the question. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's a wonderful market. All our street markets play a very vital role in providing healthy and affordable food. And it's great that every single one of them accepts food vouchers from schemes like the Alexandra Rose. Pre-COVID, Madam Speaker, we already knew we were in trouble when it comes to food poverty. In 2019, we saw a 44% rise in the number of food parcels that were given out by Hackney Food Bank. 48% of Hackney children, after you take into account housing costs, live in poverty. There's a brilliant motion coming up from this side of the House about the cost of living crisis later, so I won't go into that further. So, of course, given those stats, we were already working on our poverty reduction framework, which we adopted this March. We already had, as part of that, our food poverty action plan. Then, of course, along came COVID, the pandemic, but out of the wonderful work that was done there by mutual aid groups and the voluntary sector groups, we put those together with our faith organisations alongside our existing Food Justice Alliance, and we created the Community Partnerships Network. Into this, we put dedicated officer time. They work closely with partners, they coordinate activity, they bring in resources. This includes surplus food being delivered to our 3 food hubs at Hackney City Farm, Morningside Community Centre and Manor House Development Trust. Much of this surplus food comes to us directly through the Felix project. I was delighted to be able to visit their new depot in Poplar, which was opened formally this month. I was able to personally thank the staff and volunteers there on behalf of the over 20 smaller organisations in Hackney that benefit from their deliveries. We grant fund the Alexandra Rose scheme. We have done for the last 2 years. We'll continue to support them for the next year. We continue to core grant fund Hackney Food Bank. We provide a voluntary sector lease to them for their main depot at the Florence Bennett Centre. And we were delighted recently to offer them the Queensbridge Sports Centre as a new distribution hub, opened with an absolutely wonderful speech by Deputy Mayor Bramble. We're using the 2.8 million household support fund to proactively reach out to residents who are likely to be struggling. We identify them through our free school meals register and through the list of pensioners who we already know are on the council tax reduction scheme. We've supported the development of the first food co-op in the borough in Stoke Newington. There's a second one opening soon in Woodbury Down. We also support countless food growing organisations. For example, in my ward at Gainsborough Bridge, where we leased council land to the Community Development Trust, and they're working with EcoActive to help residents there grow food. But Councillor Sizer, you just didn't ask what we were doing. You also asked about our campaigning, about being a right to food borough. They're effectively one and the same thing. Right to Food boroughs grew out of a campaign by the food justice organisation Sustain. Basically, boroughs are asked to work proactively for food justice themselves and then to make key asks of government. By the work that I've already outlined, I've demonstrated our commitment locally to food justice, and by declaring ourselves a right to food borough, we join with the London boroughs of Brent, Islington, Haringey and Lambeth, and cities and towns across the United Kingdom, including Liverpool and Manchester, and from as far afield as Newcastle and Totnes. Together, we all pledge to continue our work locally, but also to join in calling on the government to enshrine the right to food house to a new independent regulatory body that will hold the government to account on that right, provide universal free school meals, state exactly how much of the minimum living wages and or universal credit we expect people to live on, how much of that is expected to be dedicated for food, so we can understand food justice and food poverty properly.
1 minute,
we also
Councillor
call on
Kennedy.
them to fund community meals and school holiday meals for those most in need. And to ensure national food security. Alongside of this, of course, we continue our campaign asks. We continue to give evidence to all party parliamentary groups. For example, we joined the Marcus Rashford campaign on holiday food. We joined the call for uplifting universal credit. But we all know the one thing that will actually make the biggest difference to food poverty, it's what I continue to campaign on and campaign for with all my energy, and that is a Labour government.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Sizer, do you have any supplementary question?
Not at all. Very encouraging answer. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Zoe Garbett to the Mayor. Councillor Garbett, please ask your question.
Thank you. As written.
Mayor Gambit.
Thanks, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Garbett, for the question. I think it's really important that we start with and remember why we bought the site in 2017, and that was to give us more control as a council over one of the most important areas in one of our major town centres. We did it in a very open and transparent way, and we've been consistent about our objectives following that purchase since. And at that point, we were seeing Tesco about to take the land to market after failing to get their Tesco Extra, Tesco Towers site through planning. I'm really proud that planning turned down that site at that time, and it was an inappropriate development that did nothing for our town centre, that was car dominated and had largely private flats above it. So rather than see a repeat of that with the market buying the site in partnership with Tesco, we thought that we would safeguard a supermarket for our residents and ensure that the site in our town centre was under public ownership and shaped by us through that options agreement. Since then, council officers, Deputy Mayor Nicholson, Homerton Ward councillors and I have spent hundreds of hours engaging with local people about what they want to see from the town centre. And I think one of our biggest regrets is that much of that conversation was having to be led by the community and the council, and that the developer wasn't in that space shaping a proposal that was viable and that they could bring forward to planning under the options agreement. And really powerfully, while it was a considerable investment of public money, all the development risk rested with the option holder, and if they failed to bring that development forward, the option and the site would revert to the council, and that is what has happened. We've also been more recently engaging with other stakeholders in the area, including local businesses, Tesco itself, Morning Lane People Space, people in the Narrowway, our markets team, and others in the local area. And I think it's just also important to say at this point that if you think about the development cycle and Tesco's plans for the site, they've gone from a Tesco Extra to wanting to shrink the store to local residents saying that they want a Tesco of a similar size to what's there. We have to recognise that Tesco's decisions shape the size of their store with our influence. But what we've most wanted to do is have a humanised town centre that's less car dominated on that site. I've also attended 2 public meetings with Morning Lane People Space myself. Following all of that engagement, it's really clear that our ambitions and the community's ambitions for the site need to be incorporated in any development going forward. So the council has started exploring the best route to meet those ambitions. That includes creating an in-house team to support any proposals going forward. And we believe that the best option will be to appoint a new and experienced development partner later this year or early next after a big public competition. This partner would work with the council as part of a fresh approach to the development in our town centre, and it would bring forward the much needed new homes, including affordable homes, the workspace, the local jobs and the improved public spaces for Hackney Central, as well as retaining a Tesco store. The proposed approach will be different and a change from the options agreement with Hackney Walk Limited that was backed by Duke Minster, and it will ensure that the council will be a strategic player in any development partnership going forward with much greater control over the site. And obviously, under either proposal, the original options agreement or this would still be a planning role in the site. It's also really important that we establish a new set of priorities around the site. When we formed the original options agreement, we set a floor around affordable housing, workspace, commercial space in return to the council. That was right for the policy conditions of 2006-17. It's not right for the policy conditions that we're in now, and indeed our local plan and the Mayor's London plan have moved forward significantly in terms of affordable housing and green infrastructure. We're building that in-house team now. We're progressing the community views that we've collected through the Hackney Central conversation, but also the work with the Hackney Central Steering Group. I've published a public update on this evening, which is now in the public domain, which very much echoes my response to you, Councillor Garbett. I suppose the last bit I would finish on is making sure that everyone's aware around the viability of the site. We invested £60 million worth of public money. We must have a return for that public investment, and what we deliver with a development partner must obviously deliver more affordable housing and workspace, but it must also be deliverable within our planning policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Councillor Garbett, do you have any supplementary question?
Thank you for that comprehensive answer, and I'm really happy to hear that there's an internal team that's been resourced to look at this, because the community is calling out to also be resourced, because as we know, they've got loads of great ideas about how this site can be used, so it'd be great if that could be considered. And it's great to hear that about the large supermarket, because that's one of the top priorities residents want to see in this site. But the other top priority is they want 50% social housing, so it'd be good to know if that specific ask from the community is being considered.
Mayor Glanville, you have up to 2 minutes to answer, please.
Thanks. I'll hopefully use less than 2 minutes. So I've told Morning Lane People Space that the council won't be resourcing them, I'm afraid. We will fully include them in the steering group as a partner. I'm very willing to work with them, but the most important thing for us is resourcing a team that can work with a development partner and making sure that we achieve the objectives and we engage with local residents. I think there are real dangers in a community-led plan that's not anchored in the viability that I've set out, and that is where the challenge around 50% social housing falls. And I've been clear in this chamber, in public and private meetings and conversations with Morning Space, that it is almost impossible to deliver 50% social housing on that site and deliver on all the other objectives, including a return for the £60 million investment. Now, we are very happy to talk to the GLA, we're happy to talk to housing associations, we're happy to talk to external funders, but achieving 50% social housing on a site that originally wasn't in public ownership and that is in our town centre and has to deliver commercial
1 minute
space,
remaining,
retail
Mayor
space
Glanville.
and a new Tesco's is going to be very difficult indeed. But we will push for 50% affordable housing. We'll obviously try to meet the 35% affordable housing that's set out in the London plan.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. The next question is for Councillor Joseph Agundamuran, to the Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport. Councillor Agundamuran, please ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What will the Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport be doing to ensure the Council are requesting Transport for London provides full details of its equality and diversity impact assessments in relation to the proposed bus cuts and how this negatively affects Hackney residents?
Thank you. Councillor Coburn, would you please respond? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to Councillor Agundamuran for raising this very, very important question. With no tube station in Hackney, buses are the lifeblood of this borough. They keep our communities connected and link us to the rest of the city. In fact, Madam Speaker, research from London Travel Watch published in March 22 found that Black people are the highest percentage of bus users, with 73% using the bus at least once a week, compared to 56% for white and 59% for Asian people. Buses are also used by a higher percentage of females than males, which is a ratio of 57% to 43%. And low-income groups will be disproportionately affected, because we know that 69% of those earning less than 20k per year use the bus at least once a week, compared to all Londoners. We also know that parts of Hackney, including Hackney Wick, which is the ward that Councillor Agundamuran represents, have some of the most acute levels of deprivation in the country. Buses are a huge, affordable and sustainable way for many of our residents to get around. They're cheaper than the overground and help reduce congestion. After all, the pandemic and all the talk about how we improve public transport in terms of tackling the climate crisis and toxic air pollution is quite contradictory if the bus service is going to be savaged in this way because of the inability to the government to help support TfL. You would have just noticed, Madam Speaker, that the Mayor of London has called for Grant Shapps, which is the Transport Secretary, to meet with him, which is consistently refused over 13 times over the past year. And the TfL is being used as a political football by this Conservative government as they continue to level down London. But this continued cutting off inner London bus routes is disproportionately impacting Hackney. Communities across Hackney will be cut off and worse off under these new proposals. The equality impact assessments have now been released by Transport for London, and they'll confirm what we already know, that people on low incomes will be most affected by these cuts. Similarly, people from the global majority, the elderly, and those with mobility issues will also be disproportionately impacted by them. All this will be highlighted in our own corporate response, but we'll also be pointing to poor interchange connections at Old Street between bus stops and our serious concerns at the impact of cutting back the 236 to Hamilton Hospital away from Hackney Wick, one of the most deprived areas in the country. We should be improving links to hospitals and GPs, not reducing them. So as a council, we're going to be continuing to campaign against these destructive cuts. We obviously urge the government to come together with TfL to find forward a proper solution and stop giving 2-week funding packages. And of course, we urge our residents to really sign our petition from the Hackney Labour group, which has more than 3,000 signatories, and of course to help to respond back to the public consultation as well. And of course, our message to the government, as always, is you can't level up the country by levelling down London.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Councillor Agundamiran, do you have any supplementary question?
I would like to thank the Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport for his reassuring response and the commitment to the vital work he's doing. And no, I do not have any follow-up supplementary questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Councillor Zoe Garbett to the Mayor. Councillor Garbett, please ask your question.
Thank you. So the question is as written, but I just wanted to add that I appreciate that the Mayor has responded to me via email. And the answer, but I don't feel that answer speaks to the heart of the issue, which is the acceptance of the increasing market rent around artists' affordable space.
To the question.
Okay, so yeah, my question is about the loss of artist space in Dalston and not just and making it a place that's not just the ones for those that can afford increasing market rent.
Thank you, Councillor Garbett.
Thanks, Madam Speaker, and thanks, Councillor Garbett, for the opportunity to expand upon the email response I gave earlier today. And I know that this question comes from the work that you've done as a campaign and the work that previous Dalston councillors have done, community activists and the council to save Ridley Road Shopping Village and the studios. If members cast their minds back, Madam Speaker, to 2018, following the police issuing a community protection notice, the building owners took the decision to close the market by Christmas that year. But the community fought back, councillors fought back, myself and the council fought back. We had meetings with the tenants, developers to explore every lever that we could use to keep the indoor market open and prevent an unsuitable demolition and replacement of this building. And it is because of the actions of this Labour administration we won that battle. The market stayed open, engagement happened, the community were heard, and the designs were changed. That started a journey which hit another milestone a year later when Ridley Road Shopping Village was designated as an asset of community value, as you mentioned. The landlord then submitted a more sensitive but still potentially damaging planning application to change its use class, add another storey for residential units, and change the amount of workspace in the building. However, with the new emerging local plan and the ACV designation in place, the landlord changed their plans to a largely external works, leaving the existing floor space in place. The ACV process becomes most relevant in legal terms if the asset is put up for sale. It doesn't affect the owner's ability to seek planning permission to change its use. As Councillor Garbett sets out in her question, the landlord is maintaining the current use of the building and the students will remain in the refurbished building. So technically, in relation to the ACV legislation, the cultural value of the asset will remain in place with this use continuing. But since then, the council has also gone a step further again, with the council's market team leasing the ground floor of the shopping village in the basement to support existing micro retail units, much loved by the community. This means the council will have a stake in the building for the first time and is able to protect the provision of smaller retail units at affordable levels for the shopping village traders, and also link that into the future of the street market, bringing together a full range of indoor and outdoor options for traders, as well as modern storage, including for the first time refrigerated spaces and dedicated toilets for traders. It was a plan I was proud to launch with former Councillor Snell and soon-to-be Councillor Adebayo earlier this year. Again, Labour in action delivering for Dalston. This is an example of community power and the council working together to serve and secure a community asset, helping to create an inclusive economy. Moving specifically onto the artist studios and building on the original meetings I held with those artists a couple of years ago. Officers have been in direct contact with the artists in the shopping village over recent years. Since the original redevelopment plans for the building were made known, and have been supporting the artists to find new space in the local area. As the works, the landlord is now proposing the planning application of relatively minor external works. It does not trigger the local plan affordable workspace policies, which would have made the provision for 10% of affordable workspace in any new development. But the council's engagement through the planning process is just one part of our engagement with the shopping village tenants, studio space tenants and the landlords. Area regeneration continue to work with the landlords to offer rent levels equal to the current studio rents. As a result, while the currently proposed rent levels are an increase, they are below market rents in the area and below the affordable rent set by many other workspace providers in Dalston. More importantly, the artistic and creative community and businesses are really vital to the borough, and we're doing all we can across Hackney to ensure that they grow and prosper in Hackney, including things like the new bootstrap lease that we agreed at Cabinet last month. I've got more to say more broadly about what we do around creative industries, but really conscious of time, Madam Speaker. I suppose the most crucial bit at the end is I would love us to have powers over commercial rents. We use all the powers that we can do within our own existing properties and also using planning powers. But when it comes to setting of a market rent, we don't have that power and responsibility. We are, though, campaigning with the East End Trade Skill around market rents, around the issues around business rates, and how we can get lasting reforms that truly allow us to shape our town centres in the way that we all want to see them as creative and inclusive economy hubs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Councillor Garbutt, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah.
So can we please, just a reminder to everyone, please can we stick to a question, avoid a speech or a statement when asking supplementary questions? Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was really comprehensive. And I want to focus my follow-up question on the access to space. There's been a recent report about kind of community spaces across London that are available, and we've seen a huge impact.
Councillor Garbutt, please, the question.
Okay, so the question is, are you looking to make spaces like Hackney Walk, for example, available to groups, artists, communities to use in the meanwhile, as a meanwhile use, as well as community ownership?
Thank you, Councillor Garbutt. Mayor Glanville, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Thanks. I'm really passionate about meanwhile spaces and what they can achieve. I think we've got some really good examples in Dalston, including the Eastern Curve Garden, the expanded Arcola space, and we've always tried to look at our land and building holdings in a place like Dalston to see how they can be unlocked in a meanwhile way. More recently, I was instrumental in ensuring the Garden of Earthly Delights, when we did the Hackney Central Station entrance that's just open, was moved further down to Council Owned Land in Graham Road. I think the real challenge with Hackney Walk is we've never owned that site. We don't have ownership of those arches either at Ponsford Street, on Morning Lane, or in Bohemia Place. If we did, we could do more. We are interceding with the Archco and the many subsequent owners of those very visible empty retail spaces, and our area regeneration team and Deputy Mayor Nicholson are really keen to see those come back into use. And indeed, they form part of a levelling up bid that we're putting together for the Hackney Central Town Centre. I think more broadly around community space, if you look at the Labour Party's manifesto around Space Bank 2.0, it's looking at all of the assets the community and the council owns and unlocking them for low-cost use for the community for all sorts of creative purposes, bringing the community together. I'm really inspired by what's been achieved in South America around universities and all of that work, and I want to bring that to Hackney.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor Glanville. Moving on to our next question, it's from Councillor Grace Adebayo to the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Regulatory Services. Councillor Adebayo, please ask your question.
Thank you. My question goes to the Community Safety Regulatory Service. The Mayor rightly condemned the distressing scene that took place in Dalston in May. Can the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Regulatory Service outline what engagement she has had to hold the local police to account and what the council is doing to restore trust and confidence in policing among local residents? Thank you.
Councillor Fajana Thomas, would you please respond? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Councillor Adebayo, for bringing this question to full council. I can say to you that following the incident, I met with the Borough Commander, Chief Superintendent Marcus Barnett, to raise our concerns on behalf of the council, on behalf of the community as well. He informed me that the police operation in Ashwin Street was in direct response to a number of community complaints
to the police about scooter and e-scooter riders gathering in large numbers and on a frequent basis in Ashwin Street, causing antisocial behavior. Having met Chief Superintendent Marcus Barnett to express our concerns in the strongest terms, he informed me that it was not an operation to address immigration and the border agency was not involved or present as or claimed by many residents. While at this location, one of the officers stopped a rider of a moped who, upon being stopped, was found to be wanted and therefore eligible to be arrested for an immigration offense. Please note that the rider was not stopped for anything to do with immigration, but when stopped, a check to the police control room found that he was wanted for arrest. Just to add that at the time of this operation, there was an unrelated event in Gillette Square where we have a gathering of over 300 people. I also made it clear to the BCU commander that it was an error of judgment to have the operation at a time when there was a major event in Gillette Square, which he accepted. In addition, I will also stress to him my disappointment at the fact that the community safety team was not aware of the operation before the event. Councillor Adebayo, you also asked a second question around what the council is doing to restore trust and confidence. Quickly, I know the time is limited. Both working with officers and on a personal note, we have been working with the police to improve trust and confidence by undertaking quite a number of activities. I'll just mention a few here. Through the Stop and Search Monitoring Group, encouragement was provided to the police to undertake a review of over 700 stop and search encounters. The developmental findings from this review have been used in officers' training and are included in the Trust and Confidence Action Plan. Also, we have influenced the Mayor's Office for Policing to commission a review of the current London-wide Safer Neighborhood Board, which are the board that was established to engage with the community.
1 minute, Councillor Fajana Thomas.
That structure, I can say to you, we have put Hackney forward as a pilot for the new structure when it happens. The council has also acted as a catalyst to reinvigorate police ward panel to ensure that ward meetings are happening and there are greater diverse representation. In the wake of the horrific case of child kill, a trust and confidence action plan has been co-developed by the council and the community to improve trust and confidence in policing. The community working group would monitor the delivery of the action plan through the community resilience partnership that I share and through the community safety statutory officers. And
thank you, Councillor Fajana Thomas.
I can say to you, as part of the work that we've done with the police, Section 60 stop and search have been greatly reduced to almost 50% in the borough. Thanks, Madam Speaker, and thanks again, Councillor Adebayo.
Councillor Adebayo, do you have any supplementary question?
Yes, I can only say thank you for the insight and thanks for shedding light on the question.
Thank you, Councillor Adebayo. We have now come to the end of the allocated time for this agenda. We will now move to agenda item 7. Mayor Glanville, would you like to make your statement to the council? You have up to and not exceeding 10 minutes to address the council, following which the opposition group will have an opportunity to respond. Should they wish to do so, they will have up to 5 minutes each. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's great to have you in the chair for your first full council meeting. And also congratulations and welcome to Joe Walker, a strong new voice for de Beauvoir. as our new Labour councillor. I know you've been from the very, very, very start committed to working with Councillor Billington, local residents, businesses, community organisations for a better Beauvoir and Hackney. And I really look forward to working with both of you as a powerful team to deliver the badly needed new council homes, tackle crime and antisocial behaviour in the ward, deliver better services for council tenants, and deliver even safer and even greener streets for local residents. Much of that work will be delivered by our hard-working council officers, and building on what Councillor Coburn said earlier, I'd like to welcome Ricardo Hyatt, new Group Director for Climate Change, Homes and Economy. I would imagine he will be spending a great deal of time in Beauvoir in his formative period on that agenda. But much more broadly across the council, it's an important directorate with a tough agenda, delivering on the Green New Deal to reach net zero on carbon emissions, increase our climate resilience, all the while growing our green economy and providing opportunities for local people. I'm sure all of us wish him and his team the very best in that new role. Following 2 days of extreme heat, I'd also like to thank the hard-working council staff who work to keep people safe and our services running. Our waste and recycling teams and park staff started earlier to avoid the heat of the day. Our outreach teams set up welfare stations for people sleeping rough across Hackney, and I know that Councillor Ette was out with them last Friday to see their work firsthand. Our housing officers and adult social care teams made extra welfare calls and check-ins to our most vulnerable alongside housing services staff. Our communications team worked with public health to get out important messages to local people on keeping safe, and we ran pop-ups offering advice and support and key essentials across our town centres. Our education teams provided support and advice to schools, and of course, teachers kept pupils learning safely. I'd also like to deeply thank the Fire Brigade for quickly acting to put out the fire at South Millfields Orchard and express my sadness at the loss of the Tree Musketeers' hard work. We will help them replant that area again, and I know Councillor Woodley has been reaching out. I think the images from Dagenham and across the country show the devastating impact extreme heat can have on our homes and on the lives of Londoners. I'm sure many Londoners and people across the country are now thinking about the balance between not just eating and heating, but eating and cooling. It is clear that extreme weather events will only become more common, and that the climate crisis is happening to us now. But sadly, in the build-up to some of the hottest days on record, we've seen Conservative candidates for Prime Minister lining up and falling over themselves to ditch their net zero targets and their already inadequate plans to deliver on their COP26 commitments and funding. They're being lobbied by climate change deniers in their own ranks and complaining about the cost of net zero. Well, I think all of us in this chamber know the cost of not delivering net zero. But as we know, the Conservative members opposite have historically not believed in climate change or the impact of air pollution. I'm sure just cock a hoot at the candidates that have been presented to them. But we made a very different choice here in this chamber in 2019. And because of the votes of Labour councillors, we declared a climate emergency. We know the cost of doing nothing, and that failing to stop the climate emergency will be far worse than the cost of the path to a socially just net zero. We're talking about the urban heat island effect now almost all over social media and our mainstream press, but we were talking about it in this chamber, led by former Councillor Burke 3 years ago. And we set out a path over the last 3 years to radically transform our roads, estates and town centres, to insulate them against climate change and build resilience. We planted 5,000 street trees as part of this plan, as Councillor Woodley has outlined, and that will help us manage extreme heat, air pollution, loss of biodiversity, and in the storms to come, the excess rain and flooding. I'd like to thank all of the council and their contractors who are working to keep those street trees alive alongside campaigners and residents. I've seen councillors across this chamber reaching out to Councillor Woodley's call and helping to water those trees. It's why we're doing everything to deliver on a Green New Deal for Hackney. And I'm firmly not going to steal Councillor Coburn's thunder for the item next on the agenda, our annual update on our progress to decarbonise the borough. But we have achieved a huge amount since we last met in this chamber. 40 schools have signed up to the council-funded Eco Schools programme to support them to take local action on climate emergency. And if you need a dose of why this is so important, and why the next generation is so passionate, and why we're not doing enough, visit any of our schools. Because you go in thinking that we're doing all this amazing stuff, and they challenge us to do more, faster and quicker, and with them. We're rolling out pollution green screens to 32 primary schools. Our pension fund has reduced its investment in fossil fuels. by 97%. On sustainable transport, we co-hosted London Walking and Cycling Conference, and this week we approved plans at Cabinet on Monday for 4,000 secure bike parking spaces and 675 hangars across the borough. I'll leave the big EV announcement to Councillor Coburn, but this is on top of the work to introduce school streets and LTNs, taking climate action and working to improve the air quality in our borough. Contrast that with the actions of the Mayor of Tower Hamlets, Madam Speaker, ripping out Healthy Streets infrastructure while pretending to be caring about the climate emergency and wanting his borough to be the greenest in London. In June, we approved plans for Community Energy Fund, helping community organisations deliver energy efficiency schemes. All this will be delivered by Hackney Light and Power. I saw firsthand with Councillor Woodley today the impact of our investment in terms of new ground and water source heat pumps powering new community buildings in Abney Park and the West Reservoir Leisure Centre, creating that net zero future right now. All good examples of the council working together, and I contrast that with a rudderless Tory government that is failing this country. And I also look across this agenda and see no impact of the first opposition group and holding us to account or coming out with any new ideas on how to improve our borough. I have a lot more to say about the cost of living crisis, Madam Speaker, but I'm really worried about running out of time. So I'm going to finish with how we've been standing up for the values of Hackney, whether it's unveiling the latest public artwork dedicated to Windrush generation, standing up against bus cuts, tackling the cost of living crisis, marching in London Pride, or calling out concerning undercounting in the census. This Labour administration has been standing up for our values and everything that makes Hackney special, our diversity and the progressive borough that it is today. I'd like to thank all the councillors that joined Councillor Williams and I on the Town Hall steps just before our meeting for our latest action. I'm not going to read out the full statement that Councillor Williams so powerfully made on the Town Hall steps, but her words against the decision of the Supreme Court and how much that undoing of the legal right to abortion has horrified us and so many around the world. Overnight, that 50-year protection for millions of women was taken away by politically appointed and motivated judges. That decision to end federal protection for abortion rights has a chilling and devastating consequence in the case of medical abortions, life-threatening pregnancies, those diagnosed with cancer and then unable to access chemotherapy for the duration of their pregnancy, women who have had incomplete miscarriages and other life-threatening circumstances. And we know those that will suffer the most. It is not the rich, the campaigners, the Republican pro-choice activists. It is Black, Indigenous and global majority groups who have long been denied bodily autonomy through the closure of clinics and in some cases historically enforced sterilisation. It is them that will pay the price in red states and blue, unable to access the medical care that they need. It was a direct attack on Black and Indigenous people of colour, as well as those on low incomes. And it is not about being pro-life, and this is not what freedom looks like. It is ideological fundamentalism that is resetting the clock to a time when the Constitution, as Councillor Williams said, was written by slave owners who saw women and Black people as property. And why is this important for us, Madam Speaker? Well, the consequences will not be limited to the United States. There is an insidious and disgusting right wing, I hesitate to say conspiracy, but organisations that are globally trying to set the clock back around abortion rights, contraception and women's rights. And we know that these things are fragile here, even in the UK. The way the law was designed originally in 1967, the way it has been returned to time and time again with more restrictive criteria imitating grounds for abortion. Until abortion is decriminalised in the UK, it will always be precarious and stigmatised. This is a worrying time for us all. In a borough that has a strong tradition for standing up for equality and human rights, we must stand in solidarity with 80% of the population who oppose this change. We must send a clear message that personal autonomy should be protected as a fundamental human right. Councillor Williams really articulated what we can do in this, frankly, it feels disempowering
1 minute,
period.
Mayor Glanville.
Supporting Planned Parenthood, supporting the National Network of Abortion Funds, all those campaigning globally for access to abortion, women's rights and contraception. Closer to home, women in Northern Ireland need help as well, so you can donate to the Alliance for Choice. I want us all to say really clearly and really strongly that all women have a right to bodily autonomy, but this has a disproportionate impact on the poorest women and women of colour. They have the same fundamental right and choice that all women should have. I'm clear as an ally where I stand, and Madam Speaker, that is with the women of Hackney and their rights here and globally. Thank you.
Does Councillor Steinberger from the Conservative Group wish to respond? You have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to start off by thanking all the officers in Hackney who actually in this heat, we're sitting here tonight and it's more like a sauna. We talk so much about climate change and everything, and yet we can't even get the basis right. We're sitting here, I think even in my gym, the sauna's not so hot like here. Just basic things. We spent millions of pounds and just a basic thing, putting in decent air conditioner. You should be able to sit down properly in the meeting and speak. It's just non-existent. Never mind the speaker things which just go to chala the whole time. And I wanted to take this same time to thank the NHS, the police, the fire engine, all for their wonderful work they've been doing in the last few days, because this has been as far as I remember, the last time was 37.2, which was back in about 10 years ago when we had such a heat. I was not going to talk about politics because, yes, I am a Conservative and you are Labour, but I think that there's more important things than just all day long ramming up about politics. It's very saddened to see the Fort report today, where Diana Abbott says that, unfortunately, in the Labour Party, anti-Semitism and racism is there. And unfortunately for the black community, they feel very vulnerable. This is not very exciting. And I'm proud to be here in the Conservatives and not sit in such a place where we hear such terrible reports, such terrible things going on. Furthermore, in our leadership challenge, out of the 12 candidates, 7 were ethnic minority. And out of the 3 left, or now it's 2, we have a woman. We have a potential of yet a 3rd woman prime minister, which in the Labour Party's never existed before. So much for you talking about equality and about caring for the women. Where's your woman prime minister? Why is she never allowed to become a prime minister? So I would lecture your party before you lecture others, but obviously you're always busy with ours. I also want to, at the same time, and this is a personal thing, I want to thank Penny for standing. And I'm sorry that she fell out today, because this was actually my favorite candidate. And I just hope that we'll have a good Prime Minister, which I'm sure we will, because we care about equality. And I don't think I have to talk more on this subject, because it's absolute disgrace when we're hearing from our own MP what's going on in the Labour Party. And Jeremy Corbyn is echoing those words, which makes it even more scary. I will move on to thank our long-standing officer, Gilbert Stowe, who's been here for a long time. Now, I know not all of you would know who Gilbert Stowe is, but Gilbert has been a typical Hackney boy. Whenever you needed Gilbert, he was always been there and always tried to do his best. So on behalf of us, I would like to say thank you, Gilbert, for all the work you've been doing. I want to move on to this bus consultation conspiracy that's going on here. Unfortunately, they're talking about, I don't know how many buses they want to take out now. Now, when you start going into TfL and looking the amount of money officers are getting, in the Evening Standard, they were talking about an excess of £500,000 a year. That's probably more than all of us here get together sitting here in this council. It's an absolute shamble. To be quite frank, however much money we give to the Mayor of London and this borough, there'll never be enough. They'll always want more. It'll always be the government's fault, not the fault of not knowing how to run a proper budget. And we, the residents, have to suffer. And then we have in this borough a councillor who's actually part of City Hall. Where's that campaign been the proper campaign? The answer is, I can tell you now, we're not going to get any buses back. It's you can't do your work, you're blaming the government. If you can't run administration, just don't run it. And the same thing the mayor mentions about the mayor in Tower Hamlets. He's actually listening to his residents. I have less in common with him than I have with you. But to be quite frank, he's actually listening to what happened. There's a reason why Labour lost there. They were fed up of this Russian dictatorship. And to be quite frank, you're doing the same here. You do a consultation, you don't listen. You'll be next. The Greens will take over from what it's looking like. So I just tell you, please listen to the residents, what the residents want, and stop criticizing other politicians who do. It's probably the only thing I can say he's doing right. I have nothing with this guy in Tower Hamlets. But unfortunately, residents are fed up of being bullied, and time again, people are not listening. People are fed up with this democracy. I think it's time we listen to what people want. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And also I wanted to thank you before I finish for your first meeting. And I hope the meetings continue like that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Does Councillor Garbett from the Green Group, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Speaker. Yeah, I'll use my right to speak. I just want to add our thanks to the staff and the partner services for the work they've put in to make sure our residents were protected and supported as much as possible during this red warning heat wave. Although some people were enjoying the weather, I work in the NHS and I heard stories of heat exhaustion and increased presentations at GPs and other services, showing so clearly that climate emergency is a health emergency. I also witnessed a compost heap fire on my estate and the devastation the heat has caused to our green spaces, including Millfields Community Orchard that the Mayor mentioned, tended brilliantly by the Tree Musketeers and the Millfields user group. Perhaps like many others, I found the events of the last few days quite terrifying, as it gives us a glimpse of what's to come as we continue to damage our climate and planet. Only on Tuesday, the UK High Court ruled that the government's net zero strategy doesn't meet the government's obligations under the Climate Change Act. This evening, we'll consider Hackney's decarbonisation report. I cannot stress the urgency of this situation enough, and I hope that the Climate Action Plan, when it comes later this year, recognises this. The decarbonisation report speaks of the cost of delivering net zero, and I'm happy to hear that the Mayor stressed the cost there will be of not delivering on these targets, and I want to see this reflected in all that we do. To tackle the climate crisis means considering the climate in all that we do. Unfortunately, this week, the Procurement and Insourcing Committee approved the installation of 40 new digital advertising boards in the borough. The Greens Group view is that the climate emergency was not properly considered in this decision, as each of the double-sided digital screens uses the same electricity as 3 average UK households. There is no policy plan to stipulate against advertisements for high carbon industries like SUV car manufacturers or fossil fuel companies, and we need to urgently move away from an economic system based on the promotion of endless consumption and manufactured demand. The other crisis we are facing is the cost of living crisis, and I've also heard this referred to as the cost of surviving crisis. This crisis is touching the lives of everyone in Hackney and affecting the staff we have at the council, we employ to deliver our vital services. Staff in multiple departments at the council are currently working with their unions to raise concerns about pay and conditions which are currently being unheard by council management or political leadership. Some council employees are on the path to further strike action after failed promise to transfer them onto council terms and conditions where they were brought in-house. At bare minimum, the council should be ensuring the councils isn't creating a 2-tier workforce. Last month, we stood in solidarity with the striking rail workers, and the Green Group will continue to stand with workers within and outside the council, and will be working to ensure that the council does everything within its power to support workers and residents through this crisis. We each have an opportunity to make a difference to people's lives in this time of crisis, whether that's as individuals, as parties, or as colleagues and neighbours. We have an opportunity and duty to support and empower residents, and we've been entrusted to put resources and power back into the hands of the great people of Hackney, and that's what we must do.
Thank you, Councillor Garbett. Mayor Gambier, would you like to exercise your right of reply? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Steinberg and Councillor Garbett, for your response. Just to start with the Ford report, I think it is very disturbing reading. I skim-read it yesterday evening, and I think it is sobering, the impact of factionalism within the Labour Party and how both sides were willing to use anti-Semitism, sexism and racist language in the pursuit of their individual factions. I think we've worked very, very hard in Hackney to avoid that type of factionalism within the Labour group, within our local CLPs. It has occasionally stepped out. We've stood in solidarity with Diane Abbott and with Meg Hillier when they faced external and internal attacks. And it shows when you start to think that the enemy is within and rather than opposite what happens when factionalism takes over the party. And I think the Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, racist language used and released, and I think it's really good that that has had a strong light of day. I hope that the leadership of the Labour Party will respond in the same way it has to the Equalities and Human Rights Commission report, and we must clean up our politics, not just within the Labour Party and beyond. And when you turn on the television at the start of the Conservative leadership debate and you have the sound off, it looks like a wonderful set of modern political leaders from across our diversity and gender. And it is wonderful that the leadership of the party of government is faced a competition where white men were in the minority. And I think your comments on that and the lack of diversity in the leadership of the Labour Party and where we have not had a female or black or global majority person in a leadership role is very understood and heard. But when you turn the sound up, and you hear how they talk about public services and tax cuts and the climate emergency and what they think about race and diversity and trans rights, there's nothing progressive about that group of people. They may represent visible diversity, but they do nothing to address the needs of a borough like Hackney, its concerns or what its community, people that supported the Saul report, that have gaslit accusations of racism, that don't believe there are challenges within our police and public services. And I think, frankly, I hope that they are some of the shortest lived Prime Minister and leadership people in our country, and that there's a general election and that they're replaced. I think that's enough about the Tory leadership election. Turning to buses, and you've obviously had a wonderful central office briefing, perhaps handed over from Harvey Odds last time he spoke in the chamber on this issue. But the absolute reality is that the Prime Minister, when he was Mayor of London, gave away the grant support for public transport, £500 million. He didn't argue for vehiclised exercise duty and left £1 billion black hole in TfL's finances. He then went and tried to build garden bridges and cable cars and buses that are hotter than the environment outside. You talk about air conditioning. I was on a Route Master yesterday and I got out at St Paul's and it was the most refreshing cool breeze at 40 degrees centigrade. That is what we thank our Prime Minister for. And it is absolutely right that we join with the Mayor of London campaigning for proper funding for our public transport. Look what they're doing in Europe, free transport in Spain. There are so many different models to get to net zero that embody social justice and our climate objectives, and we have no ideas from the party opposite, either here locally or on television screens in the last couple of weeks. I would also say, when you mentioned the Mayor of Tower Hamlets, obviously he has a democratic mandate and he's acting on it, but he is not listening to what residents actually believe when it comes to action on the climate emergency. And I don't wish to take us back to early May, but I was elected with 59% of the vote, 1% higher than the Labour group that sat around me. I must be doing something right, Councillor Steinberger. A higher vote than Mayor Rahman as well. Councillor Garbett, It's remiss of me not to remember officers in the NHS. I was purely thinking about the fire response, and I think the crisis that the NHS has gone through. Workers like you that have been on the front line. It's really important to recognise them. I hear, and I'm sure Councillor Kennedy did, your comments about the digital display screens. I wasn't in CPEC, but I know that there was a debate there. Just turning to staffing and pay before I finish, Madam Speaker, it is absolutely right that we're campaigning for better pay for our public sector workers. We believe in that. That's why we marched in the TUC March. What we currently have is a dispute within our workforce. Part of the workforce has accepted the national pay agreement, and part of the workforce hasn't. There would be deep inequity if we accepted increases for some of our staff and not others, and if we accept any increase without proper government funding, because every percentage we increase pay without government funding is £1 million we have to find within our existing budget, and that would lead to £1 million worth of cuts. I look forward, though, to a proper settlement that values our public sector workers that we can all get behind. Thanks, Madam
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. We now move on to agenda item 8, the Beauvoir by-election results. Can the council note the results of the recent by-election and the election of Councillor Joe Walker to the Beauvoir ward as set out in Appendix 1 to report? Noted. Thank you. Agenda item 9, political balance and appointments to committees. Can the council agree to 1. Note the review of the allocation of suites in accordance with Section 15, Local Government and Housing Act 1989, following the by-election in the Beauvoir ward on 7 July 2022, as set out in Appendix 1 of the report. Number 2, note that there are no changes to the allocation of seats on the council's committee, etc., as between the 3 political groups of the council. Point 3, approve the nominations of councillors and co-optees to the committees and commissions as set out in Appendix 2 of the report. Please agree. Brilliant. Thank you. Agenda item 10, annual update and progress with decarbonisation commitments, July 2022. Can I ask the Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport to introduce the report?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the last 2 days, we've seen that the climate emergency is here and now. Wildfires raging across London, railways and tracks melting, people being asked to work from home, and schools closing. Events that I could have never imagined to see in my lifetime. And yet, while the government is unprepared, it is councils like Hackney leading the fight against climate change. Today, I'm presenting the 3rd iteration of the climate update report to the full council, setting out how a Labour administration is responding to the climate emergency. But before I do, I want to highlight why this is so important. Madam Speaker, climate action cannot be separated from social justice. From the hike in energy prices to bad air pollution, communities in Hackney have been suffering for far too long from the negative impacts of climate change. And that's why in 2019, we declared a climate emergency, putting climate justice at the heart of everything we do as a Labour administration, delivering through our Green New Deal for the people of Hackney. More importantly, we want to put people at the heart and centre of everything we do around our decision-making processes. And that's why we have held a number of citizen engagement events over the past 12 months, including Hackney's first ever Citizen Assembly and our Green Recovery event, as well as countless visits to schools, together with Mayor of Hackney and the Deputy Mayor Bramble and other Labour colleagues. The report to full council sets out the work that has been done to help reduce Hackney's carbon footprint. Some colleagues may not be pleased to hear this, but for the first time, Hackney has now reached 100% controlled parking zones in the whole of Hackney, which is something that we've been working for a long time. Upgrading a further 20% of street lighting to LED, up to 69% of all street lights, and the remaining 11% will be completed by March 2023. A plan to eradicate the waiting list of cycle storage with our new announcement of 675 cycle hangars, in addition to the existing 650, which was already the highest in London, a groundbreaking policy. Launching a 300k community energy fund to help support our schools to reach net zero and create green, clean energy with a new wave of jobs. We completed our street tree planting program led by my fantastic colleague, Councillor Woodley, with 5,000 street trees planted since 2018. We're continuing to roll out or introducing our new low traffic neighborhood schemes. We had the Stoke Newington Church Street scheme last year in September. So that's total of 19 since 2020 and 48 school streets in total, which has reduced traffic. We launched our first electric cargo bike rental scheme, including our dockless bikes that we've recently launched too. We've just announced again the appointment of our new suppliers for the rollout of 3,000 electric vehicle charging points.
1 minute, Councillor Coburn.
Okay, that takes me to the next page in that case. Thank you, Madam Speaker. In addition to the action that we've taken, we've also made quite significant progress with key strategic documents that underpin our vision to tackle the climate crisis. This includes the parking enforcement plan, our net zero energy strategy, our air quality action plan, local nature recovery plan, our green infrastructure strategy. And moving forward, our plan is to finalise the climate action plan, which will set out the key strategic framework for the council. But we want to make sure that we do this working hand in hand with our citizens. In addition to that, Madam Speaker, as well, we've also, I should note that the council has won quite a few awards, including the Energy Efficiency Award, Keep Britain Tidy Awards. We were also ranked as one of the most healthy streets, livable neighbourhoods in London through the Healthy Street Scorecard, ranking Hackney for #1 in LTN, 20% more than any other London borough, and of course the highest school streets as well. Madam Speaker, before I wanted to quote a former US president, President Obama, who once said, "The best time to act on climate change was yesterday, but the next best time is today." And we must now redouble our efforts to tackle the climate crisis and help rebuild a greener Hackney with cleaner air and healthier lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do members wish to debate the report? Yep. Okay, there's 10 minutes allocated for this debate. Councillor Lubbock.
Thank you for that presentation, Mette, and I'd like to commend the council on the good work that it has been doing. I would just like to say that I think that it's really good that we're having this scrutiny process, but I think it's important that we do it more than once a year. Mette is committed to, Councillor Kovas is committed to a 6-monthly scrutiny of the progress of this commitment publicly. And we think it's important that even more regularly than 6-monthly that there is this is centred as part of every council decision. As we mentioned before, there was a decision earlier this week that we think it wasn't really centred on. My question is really about how are local experts being valued and included, as well as more broadly the residents in the participation. You mentioned the Citizens Assembly work, but within the report it actually says that this wasn't a Citizens Assembly in the sort of most concrete kind of sense, in that there were, it met some of the criteria for citizen assemblies, but not all of them. It was interesting to see you referring to them as citizens assemblies again, rather than sort of more sort of consultation events. And so I would like to ask whether or not we can have a genuine citizen assembly, which is co-designed with local environmental experts instead of potentially expensive consultants, and give the assembly genuine decision-making powers. Would you consider, for example, within the climate action plan, giving a citizen assembly some participatory budgeting powers? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bin Lubbock. Is there anyone else who would like to contribute to the debate? Yep, Councillor Garbett.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Coburn, for bringing forward this report, and to all the officers for all the hard work that they've done bringing forward the things that you've mentioned. I have got a lot of really detailed questions, but I know that you're open to kind of talking to those outside, so I'll pick those up, and I look forward to seeing the climate action plan. I guess my question is what I've referred to kind of earlier. Do all our decisions consider the impact of climate and net zero along with their social and economic considerations? If so, can we make this the triple bottom line decision making? Related to this, given the pressures facing the council, such as the pandemic recovery, adult social care pressures, how will we ensure that the agenda is prioritised, recognising that the cost of not addressing this is far greater?
Thank you, Councillor Garbett. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak? Councillor Etty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to commend Councillor Coburn for this great report, because and I think one of the main things that I really appreciate with regards to the climate emergency and everything, when we look about the community engagement, the way we've spoken to members of the community, to residents, And an example of this is in my ward. When we're talking about the bus gate and the LTN, the level of engagement that we've had with businesses clearly shows how much we've been able to bring everyone together before decisions are made. And I really want to commend Councillor Coban for that.
Thank you, Councillor Ete. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. I'd just like to note that in the current leadership contest for the Conservative leadership, the climate crisis, despite the fact that everybody has been sweltering, has barely featured as an element. And frankly, if we are, as a local council and local authorities right across the country, going to manage to meet our retrofitting targets and what have you, we need significant help from the central government to be able to do that. And I personally would like to see our Conservative colleagues lobbying the Conservative government to help local authorities to get that much needed cash so that we can meet our targets.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Kennedy. Sorry, Councillor Nicholson. Apologies.
Sorry.
You can say if you wish to.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. Sorry. I'd just like to welcome Councillor Coban's report, Madam Speaker, and just place on record one of the really important chapters. It's not to say that all the others aren't important, but the one of particular interest, certainly to the role that the administration is taking in regards to the businesses of our borough and the businesses that make up our local economy, are those sections which talk about our local economy and about greening our local economy and about the role of the council in supporting businesses to pivot their business models and to start to look at sustainable business in all of its different shapes and forms. Everything from defining what that means in certain sectors right the way through to an extensive program that the council is now delivering on the ground to our local businesses, which is about advice, support, mentoring, about qualification, so that actually what we're doing here is building up from the roots a green economy. That then means that we can start to talk about, as a council, as an administration, Madam Speaker, the delivery of green skills, the green economy, and Hackney as a forerunner of that. And I'm sure that Councillor Coban wouldn't mind me just pointing out that one of the largest global corporations that has its UK headquarters based in our borough is now pathfinding a last mile delivery, zero carbon, zero emission delivery network for thousands of doorstep deliveries in our borough. That is being led by Amazon based in Shoreditch from their campus in Shoreditch. These are the sorts of interventions that a Labour administration is bringing forward. These are the sorts of interventions that will deliver us a green economy that will be the absolute gold-plated example to be copied and replicated, not just across London, but around the country. So welcome Councillor Coban's report, and absolutely delighted to be able to support it this evening. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Yeah, Councillor Coban, would you like to respond? You have up to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And just to really build on both Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Root's sort of points, I think the difference between a Labour administration is, of course, we see, tackling the cost of living crisis and, this issue as a social justice issue, and it's very much interlinked with, obviously, the climate crisis. These two things aren't two different debates. These are very much interlinked when we talk about the rise in energy prices and the impact that has on, how people move around, and of course on, on food prices and our economy. And one of the things that we've been working very closely with Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Williams on is about how we reimagine our economy, and it's about how we excite people about the shift to a green revolution. And it's not just about, of course, it's about, tackling, the ecological crisis that we face and saving our planet, but it's also about the benefits and the dividend that you can get out of having a better job, you know, a better air quality. So we saw in the pandemic that people were stuck in their homes and, of course, you know, enjoying their green spaces. And it's really about trying to reimagine our economy and the jobs that are created from that. So that's why this piece of work is really, really important for us. And of course, you know, as Councillor Root has said, you know, it's down to councillors from across the chamber to really lobby their own government.
Councillor Coburn.
We see a lot of rhetoric again about, you know, we saw it from the previous administration with Boris Johnson, but again, you know, when you even look at the scale of the challenge that we face around retrofit and how we adapt our homes, you know, the rhetoric that comes out from COP26V, the funding that's required for London, it's, you know, miles apart. We're talking about hundreds of billions of pounds of needed, which we only have about £1 billion. Just quickly to respond to both the Green councillors' questions. The Citizen Assembly, there are different models of doing it, and I know that from both my role from leading an organisation which aims to engage young people in democracy, and of course our citizens' democracy is very much modelled in a way that helps support and engage with Hackney's demographics. Hackney is a very unique place, so the way you would hold a citizen assembly, for example, in Wales or in Manchester will be very different to how you do it in Hackney because of the diverse nature of that. But I'll send you a more detailed response around how we'll continue to do that. But I'll leave it there. Thank you, and I'll respond in writing to Councillor Garbutt as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Coburn. We're now moving on to agenda item 11, Members Allowance Scheme 2021-2022 and Members Allowance Scheme 2022-2023. Members are being asked to vote on the 2001 and 2022 scheme and 2022-23 scheme. The 2021-22 scheme was approved last year, pending the Officer Pay Award, which had not been granted at that time. This meeting is the first available meeting to which the 2021-22 scheme, updated with the April 2021 Pay Award, could be brought forward before members following its implementation a number of weeks ago. The 2022-23 scheme is also included as this is a legal requirement to have a scheme for the municipal year. This also will be updated once the April 2022 Pay Award is implemented. Can the Council agree to Point 1, approve the report on the Members' Allowance Scheme 2021-22 attached at Appendix 1. Point 2, agree the Members' Allowance Scheme 2022-23 attached at Appendix 2. Yes. Sorry, Councillor Steinberger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm probably one of the granddads here in the chamber nowadays. Some of you probably don't even remember when we used to have here every year, there used to come an independent body and decide on this scheme. This is very weird that for the last 6 or 7 years, nothing like that has materialized. Calling this and saying that we don't decide who gets what is absolutely just a gimmick, to be quite frank. We haven't had an independent body come here for the last 8 or 9 years. The only councillor who actually gets a dip in wages is Councillor Levy. Now, it's unfortunate that Councillor Levy probably has one of the most works in the whole chamber. Furthermore, the deputy leader, the leader from the opposition gets less than the chair of licensing, for instance. It totally doesn't make sense. This is not a dependent review. This is stitched up, to be quite frank. And I want to see an independent body come here and sort it out. Because to begin with, when we had it done, there is no such a thing in any of the London boroughs where you have opposition leaders like this. Not even in Parliament, nowhere. This is something basically to completely dictate like what's happening here. And in the same time, the mayor can have as many cabinet members as he wants without even having to go
Thank
to
you, Councillor Steinberger.
I just want to finish. This report is a shamble.
Thank you.
And we will not be supporting a report which is so-called independent and is a Labour report. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Steinberger. I would like to ask the monitoring officer to respond to you. Oh, sorry, Mayor Gandil.
Yeah, I've got a reasonably long memory joining this chamber in 2006, Councillor Steinberger, and I think you're right. We once commissioned our own independent advice that was owned by Hackney and was presented. We decided, though, across London councils to pull that advice, reduce the cost of that advice, and do it at a London councils-wide level, which looks at the pay and job roles of similar portfolios and positions all the way across London, and creates pay bands that can be then drawn down for local boroughs to implement. And that is a process that all the London councils then fund, collectively reducing the cost for individual. I think it's the sort of thing that Eric Pickles would have loved, actually, reducing those sorts of costs of independent quangos and bodies. More efficient, more nuanced, and more regularly up to date. And that is the output of that work is what you see. Now, as far as I recall, after the 2018 elections, because there was a complaint from the Conservative group that there was a higher workload in the absence of the second opposition group, there was a dedicated independent piece of work commissioned by the then chief executive to look at that, and the independent person, the same person, agreed that there was a higher workload and amalgamated effectively the second opposition leader and first opposition role, and that created that uplift in salary. Now we have a second opposition that has reverted to the original position, which effectively splits that part and recognises the work that Councillor Garbett makes to this chamber. I know there are some individual challenges that Councillor Levy faces, so I'm not going to make any glib remarks about impact, but I think it is a fair process. It's completely impartial, it's cross-party, it's used by Conservative boroughs, Labour boroughs, independent boroughs and Liberal Democrat boroughs. And the only thing, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know the monitoring officer is going to come in and say, the only thing we are changing tonight is applying the pay award to the scheme, basically. Everything else is as has previously been agreed and set out in a transparent way. Other decisions about individual salaries and pay points within those bands are for another day, and you'll be pleased to know that I've rejected any that impact positively on my own salary or those of my cabinet.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Glanville. By the monitoring officer.
So thank you very much, Mayor Glanville. In fact, you have responded to the question in the same vein that I was going to respond to Councillor Steinberger's objection. So just to confirm that there is an independent unit which undertakes and advises on the Hackney scheme, and that is via the London Council panel. And I think that, as Mayor Glanville has said, any further detailed objections that you may have are not for this meeting, because the report tonight requires council to members to agree the allowance scheme for 2022-2023, which everyone should have read, which is at Appendix 2. So also the first approval that we're asking members to agree on tonight is that the members' allowance scheme 2021 and 2022 is also approved. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yeah. Councillor Steinberger.
So, there's just 2 points which I want to be saying. It's the same in all the boroughs. Well, I want to have, please, a comparison of all the boroughs, because we've been through this, and that's why I said I'm a granddad here. We've been through all this. There is no such a thing in London boroughs. It doesn't work this way. And the second thing, when we've done this originally, there's another point I just want to. When we had this review originally, they did not do two separate things. There was again, this is just being dodged around. I'm sorry. This is unacceptable. I'm telling you.
Thank you. We could definitely take it out of the meeting.
Why out of the meeting? This is important.
We'll take it to the vote now. Thank you. Councillor Garbett, please.
Thank you. Just to make a slightly separate point, but I just want it noted that the inaccessibility of politics is quite widely recognised, and the councillor allowance is one of the many contributing factors. And I recognise it's a national issue, and we support this paper, but I just wanted that noted.
Thank you, Councillor Garbett. Does the council agree with the points set out and I read? Thank you very much. Any objections? Thank you. Noted. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Steinberger. We're now moving on to agenda item 12, Constitution Committee Terms of Reference and Membership. Members will see that we have a report before us proposing amendments to the terms of reference of the Constitution Committee and the appointment of a further member of the committee in line with those amendments. Do members wish to debate the report? Yeah. Yes? If so, we'll have up to 3 minutes to debate the report. Deputy Mayor Bramble.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to say that the terms of reference now reflect the fact that we have 2 opposition groups, so that both opposition groups can take up membership on that board. Just to say that I want to thank officers and members alike in this chamber. There's been lots of work that's been done in a cross-party working group. I know the Mayor and I have been very keen to have transparency on the work that we're doing, and any changes or revision of the Constitution is to make it more accessible. You know, what we do here sits in the heart of transforming our communities, but actually, if it's not accessible, that limits the impact. We want to ensure that we can bring the community inside of more of what we do, and that's why I made a decision to have this meeting move from a working private group to a public group. The Mayor mentioned diversity, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank Dawn and her team and congratulate them because they've won the UK Diversity Legal Award last year. And it's for recruiting diverse talent. And as lead member, I've had the pleasure of working with them. And the Mayor couldn't have said a more powerful thing. Optics is one thing, but when you demonstrate diversity, integrity in day-to-day decision-making, it really transforms and helps shape and empower our community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Is there anyone else who would like to contribute to debate? Councillor Beninaberg.
Just very briefly, I'd like to echo Deputy Mayor Bramble's statement and thank you for all the work on this to make us feel very welcome and included in this chamber and in the work that we're doing in terms of bringing additional scrutiny from the Green perspective. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Beninaberg. Is there anyone else who would like to contribute to the debate? No? Thank you. Yep. Can members agree to the recommendations in the report? Brilliant. Thank you very much. There will now be a short break in proceedings until 9:25. During this time, male and female prayer rooms are available for use on the ground floor in room 58 and 63. Can I request that members return to the chamber in good time for a prompt resumption at 9:25? Thank you.
Please be upstanding for the Speaker of Hackney.
Thank you. Please be seated. We're now moving on to agenda item 13, motions. There are 3 motions listed on the agenda for consideration this evening. Can I ask all those making speeches and contributing to the debate to be focused and succinct in their comments? In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 16.4 of the Council's Constitution, the total time for consideration of motions shall not exceed 30 minutes. Therefore, when we have finished debating each motion, I will consider the time remaining and I will come to a view as to whether we are likely to conclude the next motion debate within the remaining time, as we cannot have the motions part debated. Any motions that have not been debated shall stand referred without discussion to the next ordinary meeting of full council, and they'll be listed in the relevant agenda item in order received. First motion, 13A, cost of living crisis. Members will note from the circulated papers that the monitoring officer received 2 sets of amendments to this motion, one set of which came from the proposer and seconder of the original motion. I now understand that they no longer wish to pursue the amendment as set out on the tabled papers, but are content for that to be considered when the other tabled amendments are dealt with. Councillor Adejare and Councillor Samatar, please raise your hand to indicate you're proposing a seconding of your original motion. Thank you. Please can you also confirm that you do not wish to pursue your tabled amendment by raising your hands again? Yeah. Councillor Samatar. Yeah, brilliant. Councillor Samatar, can you confirm whether you wish to speak after Councillor Adejare or reserve your right to speak later? Thank you, Councillor Samatar. Councillor Adejare, please introduce your motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This motion sets out a call for the government to introduce an emergency budget to take urgent action to protect the people of Hackney from the cost of living crisis. And I am the proposer. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a tabled amendment proposed by Councillor Binny Lubbock and seconded by Councillor Garbett. Please can you indicate to confirm your formal proposing and secondment of the amendment? Councillor Binny Lubbock, do you wish to explain your proposed amendments? Do you wish to explain your proposed amendments?
Yes, please.
You have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the councillors for raising this really important motion. Cost of living crisis is obviously affecting everyone, especially people in Hackney. I just wanted to add a couple of things to the motions. Obviously, the first point is about keeping the benefit payments in line with inflation, asking the government to do that in a system similar to state pension triple lock. So this would be in addition to the other things that we're asking the council to write to the Prime Minister, urging them to do. But I think we can all agree we can't rely on this hopeless Tory government to necessarily deliver on these requests. So I think it's also important that we look at what we can do ourselves as a council in the immediate urgency of this crisis and in recognition of that crisis. So what I did was have a look at some other councils who are proposing cost of living crisis motions, and the proposals that I've got here in the council also resolves to section are basically lifted from the Bristol motion. So that's, you know, a proposed by Labour councillors, and hopefully, what's good enough for Bristol is good enough for Hackney. So those proposals are that we support the development of a Pledge My Cheque type scheme where beneficiaries of the £400 relief grant who do not need the additional financial support can donate it to organisations within Hackney that do, and we can promote this scheme through the council's social media and websites. The next proposal is about building on our work as a living wage borough, and that's obviously really great work that we've already been doing, and so we want to build on top of that and to urge employers to end the use of 0-hour contracts. And then undertake a consultation to remove the 15% contribution made by residents eligible for full council tax support. That's something that will really benefit our most vulnerable residents immediately in their pocket. And also obviously continue to protect children's centres and nurseries as a priority when faced with real terms government funding cuts to local authorities. We know that a lot of our residents are really reliant on those services for their childcare needs, and some of the work that I've been doing with Councillor Conway in the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Group has sort of been looking at some of those impacts. So yeah, I would really hope that the council would consider these amendments and as sort of friendly amendments and pass them today.
Thank you, Councillor Bin Lubbock. Do members wish to debate the amendments or move directly to a vote on the amendments? Okay. So, pardon? Charles, Councillor. Those in favour? Okay. Okay. So those in favour? Those against? So the amendments. So, okay, brilliant. And those against? Any abstentions? No. Okay, I declare that amendment not carried. Can I call Councillor Adjare to contribute? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a tale of two narratives. One in which Johnson and his millionaire cronies continue to party, the other in which people across our borough suffer the impact of policies which have inflicted the worst possible harm. For them, it is definitely the best of times. For us, unquestionably the worst. To add insult to injury, over recent weeks, we've witnessed the destitute and working poor attract vituperation from Tory leadership hopefuls, somewhat in tune with Malthusian principles. They blame the most impoverished for their own condition, supporting a framing which almost takes on the shape of a political conviction about who deserves to eat tonight. What is very clear is that the government has no understanding or indeed willingness to understand the damage they've inflicted on our country over the past 12 years and how this manifests itself across Hackney. In a borough with one of the highest levels of deprivation, we found ourselves situated at a precipice. 42% of our working residents are on universal credit. Among them are teachers, nurses, paramedics and support staff who in real terms are earning less than they did 10 years ago. And as the motion sets out, and as Councillor Kennedy's already highlighted, 48% of our children are living in poverty, with numbers on the rise. The cost of living crisis and accompanying cuts to the public sector are hitting every single one of our households. And as prices rise yet further, many in our community are beyond breaking point. They simply don't have anywhere or anything left to cut. And this isn't some abstract concept for us as councillors. I'm not ashamed to say that amongst others on these benches today, I am someone who can no longer rob Peter to pay Paul, as Peter no longer exists, who now dreads receipt of every household bill, the next tranche of winter fuel bills, and lives with the potential threat of bailiffs knocking at my door. With the government still failing to heed warnings, long-standing fears for how those on low incomes will manage have been brought to fruition, with food bank usage having grown exponentially and more of our residents forced to access our finite hardship grants. With universal rises in cost, our residents face punishing budgetary pressures which come on top of the ending of the £20 uplift to universal credits and the failure to uprate benefits in line with the current rates of inflation. This unquestionably needs to be addressed. As we continue to exist amid a cost of living crisis, a cost of doing business crisis, a cost of learning crisis, and a cost of climate change crisis, we are now also faced with our children and young people in crisis as a result of the biggest fall in standards in a generation. As outlined by the BMJ, we've reached a place where, as a consequence, we are seeing children as young as 11 suffering from mental health issues, with recent Centrepoint research highlighting that almost half of 16 to 25-year-olds have gone to bed hungry in the past year. The collision of immediate hardship and the fear and threat of even more destitution to come is a time bomb, with potential for longer-term negative health impacts across the board. And putting it simply, the buffers we once had are wearing thin. As we rapidly approach what could be a summer, autumn, winter, and next spring of discontent, the question has to be, how much worse do things have to get before this government recognises the action it needs to take? Right now, we need urgent intervention and increased level of support, with a stripping away of politically imposed design features that do the opposite. Ultimately, we as residents were elected onto the council to represent the needs of those we serve. And knowing that within each of our wards we have people who have been pushed to the brink, it's incumbent upon us to do what we were elected to do and work to serve their interests. People are suffering, and we can't sit by and allow these circumstances to persist. The financial levers which can make a swift and immediate difference sit squarely with the government. And this motion sets out tangible and desperately needed means of ameliorating some of the immediate damage. Support for this motion shouldn't be considered along party lines, rather a collective understanding of the hardships our community is experiencing, accompanied by an overwhelming desire to ensure that residents and small businesses are afforded the protections they rightly deserve.
1 minute, Councillor
Thank you.
Ajari.
Moreover, that when we look at them, or when we meet them in our surgeries or out on our streets, we can look them squarely in the eye, having demonstrated tonight that we are all committed to fighting for them and will not stop until we are assured that the government has listened and acted accordingly. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Adjari. And I invite Councillor Samatar to contribute to this debate. Thank you.
One, two. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And how amazing it is to be able to say that. And I also like to thank Councillor Adjari for moving the motion so powerfully. Under the Tory government, the wealth of the few is growing. We all know this, while the plight of the many is marginalized. The impact of the cost of living crisis is disproportionately hitting poorer households the hardest, especially the elderly, the disabled, and children. Madam Speaker, as a former educator and youth worker, my heart aches for children who are finishing school for the summer. Instead of joy and excitement, their families face 6 weeks of struggle and worry over whether they can even eat. I commend the campaigners across London, even here in Hackney, who are leading on right to food. Their slogan, "Hunger is a political choice," and the fact that children are going to bed hungry should shame us all. But Madam Speaker, this out-of-touch government is shameless and without compassion. UK pay is falling at record speed, and today public sector workers whose wages have been eroded by more than 20% are told they face another real terms pay cut. We must back our nurses, our doctors, our teachers, rail workers, postal workers, and barristers, as all are fighting against gross inequalities. I echo the words of the great Mick Lynch, who said, "We refuse to be poor anymore." Hackney's poverty reduction and framework does offer practical and achievable solutions that can make real difference to the lives of our residents. But Madam Speaker, that is not enough, and we need more. And a change of government is the right place to start. The country has suffered enough under Tory austerity and incompetence. Finally, may I leave members with a reminder. Our constituents voted in a time when trust in politics was really low. They listened to the promises we made when we knocked on their doors and elected us to represent them in this chamber. So I urge members to recognise this and stand up for our constituents. Madam Speaker, I second.
Thank you, Councillor Samatar. We will now proceed with the debate on the substantive motion. The following members have indicated they wish to speak to the motion. Deputy Mayor Bramble, Councillor Joe Walker, Councillor Cara Williams, Councillor Claire Joseph, Councillor Polly Billington, Councillor Claudia Turbot-Deloff. I may not be able to call everyone due to time constraints, but I will try my best. Please remember, if your point has been made, please be mindful of the allocated time and do not be repetitive. Thank you. You have 1 minute to speak. So I'd first like to invite Deputy Mayor Bramble. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's really with a heavy heart that I speak when our residents face whether they heat their homes or feed their children. This is the reality that we face. And with the Tory leadership, you have candidates standing up saying they have difficult decisions. Well, these are the difficult decisions our Hackney residents have to face, Madam Speaker. They are very testing times. And Councillor Kennedy and I were in London Fields where I was invited to open another food bank, and it's really troubling because actually there's this thing that is rising in work poverty. The majority of people that Councillor Kennedy and I spoke to were people in work with young children. This is the reality. We used to live here in a society where you had a job for life and you were able to provide for your family, and that is not the reality of our Hackney residents. So it's really important that we stand up and do all that we can. The last thing that I say is that this government doesn't even recognise the word crisis. It's, you know, they just talk about the cost of living because they are so out of touch. We understand there's a crisis, and that's why we're doing all we can with the support packages that we're putting in place, whether it's grants, the provision that we have for our children and young people in our schools, and we'll continue to stand up until we have a Labour government.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. I'd now like to invite Councillor Joe Walker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was reported today that inflation had hit above 9% and is due to rise to 11% by the end of the year. And this is going to have a profound effect on many of our residents and their standard of living. While the Tories are fighting over tax cuts and fantasy economics, it is coming down to Labour-led councils to address this crisis. During the recent by-election, we stood on a platform of a strong and experienced Labour team to work with residents to tackle the cost of living crisis. And I welcome the measures that have already been put in place by this council to support our most vulnerable residents. But the council can't do it alone, and we have to recognise that the council needs to work with existing assets in our communities, such as schools, such as the voluntary and community sector and the health sector, to ensure that our most vulnerable residents are protected, they're getting the right support. And so I support this, this motion, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. I'd like to now invite Councillor Cara Williams, please, to speak on the motion. Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm really sorry, I just can't hear with the fans behind me. So I think it's really helpful to put on record what this Labour administration does and what we stand for. We stand on the side of our residents who have been hit hard by 12 years of Tory austerity. Earlier in the evening, Councillor Kennedy gave a rundown of what we're doing in terms of food poverty. I also just want to talk about a few things that we do. The Mayor also spoke and said that we have marched alongside the trade unions in the We Demand Better march in June. But the Speaker has got a number of dedicated charities which we promote, and there are charities across the borough which, as a council, we promote via social media and comms, or all of our outlets. Residents have given very generously to that, including over Christmas, to our food banks. And as already been said, we shouldn't have a food bank. It's an absolute disgrace. People should be able to afford to buy their own food and not have to choose between food eating and heating. We have also, Councillor
Councillor Williams.
Have I finished?
So 1 minute, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. I would now like to invite Councillor Claire Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. During a recent Conservative leadership debate, the candidates discussed the cost of living crisis and putting money back in people's pockets with no reference whatsoever to wages, only taxation. But many people in Hackney earn so little they never pay tax, and their wages have to be topped up by the taxpayer. If you increase wages, not only do people spend more, you collect more tax and you also save on the benefits bill. A stable economy is built on decent wages that reflect the cost of living. And I think it's really important that we point out that whilst the Tory party present themselves as small state, they in fact preside over large amounts of spending in the form of in-work benefits. Another example being housing benefit, which is around 23 billion of taxpayers' money a year, which is even after the introduction of the local housing allowance, with much of that money going to private landlords. This bill could be slashed, and much of the so-called housing crisis in both public and private sectors could be alleviated if the government funded council housing, which people can actually
Councillor
afford.
Joseph.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Councillor Polly Billington.
Permission to stand, of course. This motion is about the cost of living, but it's also about dignity. The dignity we should be able to have, head held high, by not having to ask for food vouchers or for handouts. The dignity of being able to keep our homes warm and comfy without special measures to help. The dignity we all deserve to be able to work for an honest day's pay, to care for our families, and the dignity of a roof over our head. The dignity we deserve as human beings, even if we can't work, to thrive and to live fulfilled lives. That dignity is not afforded to many of our residents by this government, and councils across this country are having to plug the gap. This government's record is laid out clearly by some of the contestants in this prime ministerial game show we've seen over the last few days. They are the ones that admit, and I quote them, these are directly from those would-be prime ministers: we have the highest taxes for 70 years.
Councillor Billington.
Prices are going up. We're facing a recession. We can't afford to pay nurses and care assistants more because we don't have the economy to pay for it. And yet they admit they have lost billions in fraud. This is, in their own words, the worst economic crisis of a generation.
Thank you.
And yet who picks up the tab?
Thank you, Councillor Billington.
Labour councils like this one and across the country, and they are the ones who should be there to help all of us in the future.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Councillor Claudia Turbot-Deloff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to bring a further acknowledgement as well to how this horrendous cost of living crisis is hitting migrant communities across the country. And I want to acknowledge that those hard-working migrant communities contribute day in and day out to the economy of this country. But yet again, this is another blow from central government who is anti-migrants, hostile, and doesn't make anything easy for the lives of these hardworking people across the country that are contributing to our economy on a daily basis, having less chances to continue in education and future prospects. I also want to highlight very briefly the empty seats in these chambers that are not here to listen to these proactive measures we're taking to support the people of Hackney. So I just want to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turbot-Deloff. Councillor Adjare, do you want to exercise your right to reply?
Do you know, Madam Speaker, I don't really think, having what I've heard in the chamber this evening, that there is a need for me to. It's clear that we are calling on this government to take the action that it needs to take, and this is a no-holds-bars request. It's a demand to a certain degree, but until we get it, we will not stop. So thank you, everybody, for everyone who's contributed to the debate. It's really, really appreciated.
No, that's fine. Can I now put the motion to vote? Those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone in favour? Yeah. Brilliant. I declare the motion carried as unanimous. Thank you. So we only have 5 minutes left, so we don't have enough time to debate the second motion, so we'll have to be carried to the next full council meeting. Okay. We have come to the end of the 30 minutes for consideration of motions. Unfortunately, there has not been time to debate the long COVID fair vote motion, but as explained at the start of this item, those motions. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Whilst the meeting can be extended to 10:30, the Constitution only allows for 30 minutes for motions, and so therefore the allocated time that we have for motions this evening is 9:30 to 10 p.m. So even with the extension, we still cannot go into the additional 2 motions to consider those because we cannot do so under the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. So those motions shall stand deferred to the next ordinary meeting of full council on the 14th of September, will be the first motion to be debated that evening. Mayor Glanville.
I really do think that we need to reference this back to the Constitution Committee. I do think it's outrageous that we cannot debate really important motions that are of interest to this borough by extending standing orders. And I think it's an absolute error that cannot be overruled by the chair as speaker. So I think if we can urgently refer that to the Constitution Committee and ensure that we actually have a constitution that's fit for purpose and democratic and puts the chamber in charge of the constitution for the benefits of our residents, not imprisons us. It's absolutely wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Deputy Mayor Bramble.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I echo the comments of the chair to just reiterate that is exactly why the reason that I took the internal working group that was cross-party behind closed doors into the public domain to ensure that the Constitution is fit for purpose. And that is exactly why we now have the public meeting to ensure that we have that cross-party input and go through that page turn by turn, line by line, letter by letter to ensure that the Constitution works for the people of Hackney and not the people of Hackney working towards the Constitution.
Councillor Lynch.
I just wanted to say as well, echoing what my colleagues have said, this motion wasn't about me. People know why I brought this motion. People close to me in this room know why I brought this motion. This motion wasn't about me. This motion is about those people that had to wear bin liners to deliver care to people that were highly infectious. This is about people at the Homerton and other people that live in Hackney that had to drive buses and had to do other front-facing work and not have the restrictions. I carried on doing stuff and got exposed to COVID. This isn't about me. This isn't about me as a councillor. This is about me using my position to give others a voice.
Thank you. I understand. This motion will be the first motion to be debated at the next full council meeting. Apologies.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. We have now come to the end of the agenda and I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.